Hello, this is Arlo Kilpatrick, the erudite Kinophile, and today I'm going to be continuing my series on Honey Miletski's book Understanding Bestiality and Zoophilia. Today's video is going to be kind of short because the chapter that I'm looking at is relatively short, but it doesn't really fit in with any of the other chapters, so I can't really fold it into another one. So, today I'm going to be looking at the childhood histories of the participants in this study on bestiality and zoophilia. So, looking through, first, where the bestialists grew up, and it kind of matches where they live now. It is a bit more diverse because a bunch of people moved around a lot, some people from Japan or Sweden, but overall, they mostly grew up in the United States, and that's to be expected given how the sample was collected. Now, when it comes to who raised them, it's pretty typical of ordinary people. Most of them were raised by both parents, both men and women. And some of them were raised by step-parents, some of them were raised by a single mom. Some of them had grandparents involved in their raising. It all depends. When it comes to spending time with people growing up, well, not necessarily with people, because animals was one of the categories. They spent a lot of time with animals. Not terribly much. I mean, they spent a decent amount of time with friends and siblings as well. But they didn't spend too much time with extended family, and not too many people answered the question when it came to whether they spent time with their parents growing up. I suppose it makes sense to me, because if I were being asked who I spent time with growing up, I wouldn't say my parents. I would say probably friends. And animals, of course. Now, women responded pretty much the same way. A lot of them spent time with animals, a lot of them spent time with friends. The data there isn't all that conclusive, if anything, except that their backgrounds are pretty typical. Now, when it came to growing up with pets or animals, both men and women tended to grow up with pets, dogs and cats, of course, being the most common, but also a few grew up with horses, cows, even mustelids like skunks or something along those lines. And women had much the same pattern. Wow, that was very short. So, here's what I'm going to do for the rest of this video. I'm going to comment a little bit on the recent Supreme Court rulings on DOMA and on Proposition 8.
Alright, so this part of the video may be off topic when it comes to this series, so if you like, skip to the next video, and basically you can continue on with this video series, this time more focusing on the sexual history of the zoophiles and bestialists. But I felt that it was necessary to some extent to comment on the recent Supreme Court rulings on Wednesday. So here we go. In case you haven't heard, and you probably have, the Supreme Court made two landmark rulings on gay rights on Wednesday. The first of these rulings has to do with the Defense of Marriage Act, which was signed into law in 1996 by Bill Clinton, and, among other things, defined marriage as between a man and a woman when it came to federal regulations and federal recognition of such marriages for the purpose of providing benefits, Social Security, estate taxes, all that kind of stuff. Basically, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 ruling, decided that to categorize same-sex marriages as somehow not real, even though they're legally recognized in certain states, is to unduly discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, and thus that sort of discrimination is unconstitutional. So they struck down the part of DOMA which forbids the federal government from recognizing same-sex marriages, which means not that any not that same-sex marriage is legal yet, because in 37 states it's still not, but that the same federal benefits which go to straight married couples in states where uh, gay marriage is acceptable are now legally required to be given to gay couples as well. To me, this seems fair, and actually, from a conservative standpoint, I think that this is a decent ruling anyway, because if you ignore the sort of ethical problems which a lot of people have with being gay, which I think are ridiculous, but conservatives have this view, so whatever. I would say that from a conservative standpoint, this doesn't do anything to force the states into accepting gay marriage. All it does is leave the question of whether marriage between homosexuals is legal up to the states. Now, of course, there's probably going to be another Supreme Court case in the next few years discussing whether marriage is a constitutional right, and thus whether even states that don't legalize it currently have to provide that to their residents. But that victory has not come yet. Not that I'm necessarily saying that it will be a victory, but I think the way that public opinion is going and the way that marriage is being redefined, that's how marriage is going to be eventually. It's probably going to be that way much sooner because of another ruling on Proposition 8. And that ruling has to do specifically with what happened in California. Now, in California, the courts legalized gay marriage, and then, through a voter referendum, the state banned it again, making gay marriage illegal. So, naturally, couples that wanted to get married in California sued for their right to get married, and something interesting happened. The state basically said, we're not going to appeal this. We really do think this is unconstitutional. And so, neither Democrats nor Republicans actually present in the state are going to defend this ruling, which meant that it fell upon conservative groups to try to defend Proposition 8. And the Supreme Court basically took that conservative group, or that bunch of conservative groups, and said, you have no standing to defend this law. You are not directly injured by it, by the appeal of Proposition 8. And only the state can decide whether to defend such a law in court or not. So, what the Supreme Court did effectively was send that ruling back to the lower courts, which had already repealed Proposition 8, and thus same-sex marriage is going to be legal next month for Californians. And since California is the most populous state in the Union, that means that about 30% of the people living in the U.S. now live in states where gay marriage is legal. This is great, because so long as we as a society are defining marriage to be a legal contract between two consenting adults, there's no difference whether the couple involved is of opposite genders or of the same gender. It makes no difference when it comes to how the state defines marriage and how it grants benefits to married couples. Now, I don't think this has much to do with bestiality, because even though some conservatives would claim that the next thing to come would be animal marriage, I think this is outright ridiculous. An animal can want food, can want sex, can want companionship, but marriage? Power of attorney over the rights of an ill spouse? Or automatic inheritance of property of the spouse? How exactly is an animal going to claim these rights? How are they going to understand it? I mean, I suppose it would technically be possible if we could somehow breed animals with human levels of intelligence such that they could understand social contracts like this. In that case, yes, then marriage to animals would be fine. But as things stand now, with animals clearly not on the same level of abstract thinking as human beings, they can have sex just fine, but they can't really get married. They don't know what marriage is. So anybody who's claiming that this ruling is going to lead to polygamy or bestial marriage or whatever really has all their work still ahead of them to convince anybody that this does anything except treat gay couples as identical to straight couples when it comes to the purpose of defining marriage in terms of federal benefits and in terms of whether marriage should be legal in California. So that's it for this video. I'm going to make the next one relatively soon, and it's going to be on, as I said, the sexual histories of people who have sex with animals. So that's it for this video. This is the Erudite Conophile signing off.